When you pick a thorn bush as your king, don't be surprised when it ends painfully. Welcome back to the Words of Life podcast with Adam and Kevin. As you might have guessed, based on our track record so far, we are going to be talking about Abimelech from the book of Judges, the only non-judge person that
gets this much press, right? Anyway,
gets a lot of press, you know? But yeah, so if you're looking carefully at Kevin's right hand, you'll notice he's got a little boo-boo. He had an unfortunate accident with a mirror. He broke a mirror, and he's going to have bad luck for the next 7 years, starting with his finger. So, yeah, you want to just give everybody a little...
Yeah, I just sliced
synopsis?
it open pretty good there, trying to take the mirror down the other day, and it broke. And, 7 years bad luck. But I actually put 7 stitches in my finger there, so maybe there is something to that story after all. But, yeah, other than that, pretty good. No major damage, doesn't seem like, so fortunate in that sense.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad it wasn't. Could have been a lot worse.
Could have been a lot worse. Yeah, just a couple hours in the ER is all it took. So
okay. Well, I'm glad glad we have doctors and
yes,
and people that know how to sew, right? All right. Well, so we are jumping into Judges chapter 9. And this chapter is the story of Abimelech, who is the one of the sons of Gideon, who has, he saved the people of Israel from the Midianites and through God, of course. And he had, then he passed away. And we have now the next generation being in charge. So one of his sons, his name is Abimelech. And we actually saw him at the end of chapter 8.
Yeah.
Right? You want to bring us up to speed on what we found there, Kev?
Yeah, we saw that he had, and this number gets thrown out a lot. It's hard to tell exactly what the number should be, right? But he says in there in chapter 8, Abimelech had 70 sons. And then it says Gideon had 70 sons, and he also had a son named Abimelech. Now, if he's in the 70 or not, I don't know. Who is from one of his concubines who was in Shechem. And that's going to be so important to the story here. So he is one of his sons, not one of his sons of his wives per se.
Right.
But he had many wives and also many concubines, apparently. One of them was in Shechem, had this son whose name Abimelech. And that's who this whole chapter is going to be about here after Gideon dies.
Yep.
What happens next. So.
And if you recall, Gideon refused to be a king.
Yeah.
He refused to be the number one, in charge type guy for good reason. He wanted everybody to worship God.
Yeah. The Lord will be your king, right? Is what he had said.
Yeah. God is our king. We don't need a king. And then that has had always been the situation for a long time. As they came into the promised land, they were a nation of people in God.
Yeah.
And so, but Abimelech has this idea that he does want to be king, right? So Abimelech, the son of Gideon through a concubine, but a man of Shechem. So, why don't you take us off? Just give us a brief breakdown there, Kev, of the beginning of the story. And
Sure. So he goes to Shechem. He goes to his relatives and his mother's family and basically convinces the people of that town and says, hey, I should rule over you, right? We should convince the rest of the people, look, is it better that 70 different of Gideon's children have some sort of rule or authority or people look up to them because of, Gideon? Or would it be better if just one guy did it? And, oh, by the way, when you go to pick who that guy is, remember, my mom is from this town, basically, right? I'm of your people. And so that sounds good to them, the leaders of Shechem. That sounds good to them and say, yeah, we like that idea. We're going to make you king. Now, that's great. They do that there in this one town. But, he then basically does what kings do in this period of time and after, is he goes to secure his throne by eliminating all the competition, right? So even though Gideon had said, hey, I'm not going to be a king and neither are my sons after you, he's worried when he's king that maybe they will also make a claim. So he gets some money from the temple of the Baal
Right.
and hires a bunch of worthless fellows. Yeah.
Thugs and mercenaries,
yes,
right?
To go with him, and they
Yep.
go down and they round up the rest of them and kill them all, except for one who escapes, one of the youngest, whose name is Jotham. He escapes. So while Gideon had all of these kids at the end of chapter 8, at the beginning of chapter 9, all of them have been wiped out, basically, save two.
Right.
Abimelech, he's killed all his half-brothers, and Jotham has escaped. And so now he is effectively king over Israel. How much of that he rules is hard to say, but he's running the show for several years there because of this. So
yeah, at least several towns or cities, in that region. And we're going to come back and spend a little bit more time on what Jotham did.
Yeah.
But he basically climbs up to a tall point and he curses Abimelech and all the people that did this treacherous murder. And then we have like the curse clock starts ticking, because Jotham's proclamation is like this allegorical, fable-esque, parable-esque statement, right?
Yeah.
That God at the end decides to go ahead and bring to fruition. So whether it was truly prophetic or not, or just something that Jotham just was inspired somehow to say, it does become true at the end. So we're going to spend some time on that in a second. But so we have these. It may have been a total of 70, save 2, so 68 were actually killed. They just rounded up, or there were 70 that were actually killed. They just keep using the number 70. But you have Abimelech and Jotham still alive, so we're not sure if there were
72 kids total, or were there? Yeah, it's hard to say what the actual count is there, right?
But regardless, they killed a whole bunch of Gideon's household and family, and that left this ability for Abimelech to just step into authority and with no competition. So he's in charge for a few years. And then this guy shows up in town. His name is it Gaal?
Gaal.
Gaal.
Yeah.
Right. So we'll just call him Gaal. Gaal shows up, and he's like he's kind of underplaying Abimelech, and then he gets drunk and he starts running his mouth.
Yeah.
And then, go ahead and tell us a little more, Kevin. You were talking about you were making me laugh earlier. So.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So this guy comes in. He's Gaal, the son of Ebed. He moves into Shechem with his relatives. So he shows up, right? And the leaders of the town sort of put some confidence in him, right? He's kind of a guy. They sort of like him. And it's hard to say, but either before this or part of this, maybe as well, is that the people sort of sour. The people of Shechem sort of sour on Abimelech, and so they've set up basically people to go and mug people, if you will, in the mountains around the town, right? And just to sort of start causing problems towards Abimelech, right? They're there
undermining his authority. You can't keep people safe.
Yep. And so they're doing this, and this guy's immediately mentioned, so maybe he's part of that plot and part of what's going on there. But they're there. The people trust him a little bit. He's starting to build a reputation. So they have the harvest. They go out. They gather a bunch of grapes. They crush them, make them into wine, have a celebration, right? And it appears that he's what's the saying? In wine there is truth, or something like that. He thinks he's got something to say that's pretty smart, and now he's not afraid to say it. And so he's basically saying, who's this Abimelech guy, right? Why is he ruling over us? He doesn't live here in town with us. Hey, if I was out on the field with him, let him show with his army, right? And I'll show him what for, right? Like, let him come out and fight me on the field, basically, right? Now the problem there is a governor in Shechem who is allied and appointed by Abimelech, right? Who goes and tells him of this Zebul, who also, Gaal has some bad things to say about. Who's this clown, right? Basically,
right.
And so he goes off and tells him, right? Tells Abimelech that, hey, basically, you got a problem down here, right? This guy's down here and he's running his mouth. The people are turning after him, and you're sort of so you need to come down here and do something about this, right? And so this sort of sets in motion these events that are going to happen that are going to lead to the men of Shechem now sort of fighting against Abimelech, even though they were the ones who originally had appointed him.
Yep, absolutely. So, yeah, Abimelech basically brings his guys, Gaal gets his guys, and they basically have it out with each other, right?
Yeah, and there's a funny story there too, right? When it's apparently Gaal's a big talker, right? Because Abimelech comes down at night, right, and he gets set up sort of up against the mountains behind him, and the next morning they're out at the city gate. Gaal is out there talking to Zebul, right, and as the sun is coming up, Abimelech shows himself or it's coming towards him, and while they're yapping, he's like, there's people coming, right? There's an army coming, and as they're approaching, Zebul tells him, no, it's just the shadows. The way the sun is shining, it just looks like there's people. It happens all the time. And so then he keeps yapping, right? Apparently, they keep chatting while the army is getting closer, and then he looks and he's like, no, there's definitely people. Look, they're down here already by the oaks. They're real people, and that's when Zebul tells him, like, oh yeah, that's Abimelech and his crew, right? Like, get on out there. You said you wanted to fight. Here he is, right?
Yeah. Put your money where your mouth is.
Put your money where your mouth is, right? And,
Yep.
and that classic line we sort of have that we sometimes say, maybe it's old now and people don't say it anymore, but Gaal his mouth is writing checks that his body can't cash is what we're going to find out real quick, right? Yeah.
Right.
You're a lot of talk when you were all liquored up, but here you go. Let's meet out on the field now and see what happens. And so that's what's going to occur here.
Yeah. And so Abimelech ultimately ends up basically sacking Shechem.
Yeah, they meet on the field, and Gaal and his guys basically run. Right, they
hold themselves up in the tower, and Abimelech's basically. So at the end of the story, right, we see this. Now we'll come back to the very end because the tale of Jotham, or the parable, or the allegory of Jotham, really kind of gives us some clues as to how everything is going to end up. So let's go ahead and circle back to that really quick and just kind of break down what he said. And so he tells this story about these trees that want a king. Hey, the trees want a king, so they go and they want a king. They go to the olive tree and they ask the olive tree to be their king. The olive tree says, I'm useful as an olive tree.
Right.
I don't need to be king, so no thank you. And they try that multiple times, with a fig tree, the same story. The vineyard, the vines, like, no, we make grapes and we make wine, and wine is what makes people happy. So why would we want to be king? We're good. So they're finally left without any choices between the trees. So they decide to choose the briars, the thorn bushes.
Yeah, the bramble, right?
Yeah, the brambles,
the tumbleweed, if you will, right?
Yep. Take it from there.
Yeah, so they go and they say this thing. So when you get down into 14, we'll read this. It says, "Then all the trees said to the bramble, 'You come and reign over us.' And the bramble said to the trees, 'If in good faith you are anointing me king over you, then come and take refuge in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon.'" And then he sort of gives us his explanation right there as well. And so in 16, he says, "Now, therefore, if you acted in good faith and integrity when you made Abimelech king, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal," remember that's Gideon, "and his house, and have done to him as his deeds deserved," and we'll skip over what he says, "if then you've acted in good faith and integrity with his house that day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come out from Abimelech and devour the leaders of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come out from the leaders of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech." Right? So he basically is saying, hey, you wanted a king, and you asked, the olive tree, who in this case may have been, let's say, Gideon, right?
Mm-hmm.
You asked Gideon, and he said no. And then you went and you asked, the fig tree and the vines, right? And asked them. So maybe that's in reference like his sons, right? And no, they wouldn't be your king either, right? Because Gideon had said no. So then the only person who was willing to be your king was this worthless guy, Abimelech, right? Who he compares to a bramble. And he says, and so look, if everything's on the up and up, and all of this is legit, and you acted in integrity, and you treated Gideon and his family rightly, And, he says in verse 17, "For my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you from the hand of Midian, and you've risen up against his house this day and killed his sons and made Abimelech, his son of his female servant, king over the leaders of Shechem because he is your relative," right? So he says, if you acted with integrity, but by the way, here's what you did, then everything will be good. And if not, then basically, may he destroy you and you destroy him as well, right? Like, if you all acted how I think you really acted, you're all just brambles and worthless fellows, then you deserve each other, right? And each of you should get what you deserve, right, from being with the other one here. And then he runs off and hides. But that's his curse, his prophecy, and again, the literary type there is what we call an allegory, right? Because he tells this story, but the story has moral or political, which often allegories do, political relevance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what he's doing there. And then, God will use that, whether, again, he gave it to him or whether he just acts out the things that he was going to do. And Jotham is, Jotham may just be aware of, look, you've acted in this way, and when you act this way, this is how God responds. And so don't be surprised when this happens. And so that's how we see then God, this thing saying an evil spirit came between Abimelech and the people of Shechem, and that's what causes all these problems to sort of spin out there.
Yep.
And so what we're expecting is destruction both ways, right? Abimelech will destroy them, but they will also destroy him as well.
Yep.
And we see that start to play out there as this battle takes place, and then the fallout after that.
Well, it's interesting in Jotham's story portion of his declaration there is that this silly idea that the thorn bush, the brambles, could provide shade.
Yeah.
Right? Now, in this part of the world, it's fairly rocky, fairly arid, most likely. The brambles were basically just for burning only, right?
Yeah, right. The only real value is to
real value is to burn them up and let them produce some heat for you, right? And so that's what they chose for their king.
Yeah,
somebody whose only real value is to just be burned up or to.
That's right, because the olive says, no, my olives make oil, right, and is to anoint kings and for blessing, right? And the fig says, oh, my figs provide sweets and delicacies, right, that people enjoy to eat. And after they're done with trees, the trees ask a vine, right, which is not even asking trees anymore. And the vine says, no, I make grapes, and people are made glad by my wine, right? But what is the value of the bramble? It has none, right? Yeah. And so certainly he takes the job because he has nothing better to do. Is sort of the idea here. But he's only good for one thing. And so don't be surprised when that one thing happens, right?
Exactly. So there's this idea, this turning point in the success of Abimelech, where God basically sends division between Abimelech and Shechem. Okay.
Yeah.
So every time we read something like this in the Bible, sometimes we're tempted to try to, or we just naturally want to think negatively about God, like how would God do this? It sounds like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Right. But we understand through other scriptures that when we see phrases like that, God is not doing anything that is evil, because God cannot do evil, but he will allow wicked people to suffer their own consequences. And so we see when wicked people do wicked things, there will be, more often than not, wicked or bad consequences. And so he uses their sin against itself or against themselves. But we see passages like the first chapter of the book of Romans. The Apostle Paul has this big letter to the church in Rome. And I don't know, 4 or 5 times in that first chapter, Paul says that God gave them up or gave them over because of the wickedness of their sin. He's like, fine.
Yeah.
They
didn't want to retain a knowledge of the truth. They didn't want these things, so God gave them over to their own lusts and desires to work, wicked deeds amongst themselves, and then the consequences of that they received the rewards of that lifestyle, right, and those doings. And so we see that playing out there in Romans.
I was gonna just quickly get over to Psalm 9.
Yeah,
I should have had that queued up, but we also have Proverbs like 16:18 is kind of an often quoted verse. if you grew up reading the King James or the New King James version, you'd read something like "Pride cometh before the fall."
Right.
But in the book of Psalms, the 9th Psalm, verse 15 and 16, says there, "The nations have sunk in the pit they have made, in the net that they hid, their own foot has been caught. The Lord has made himself known. He has executed judgment. The wicked are snared in the work of their own hands," right?
Yeah.
And that's definitely what we're really seeing here. Another verse you can look at is from the New Testament would be Galatians 6:7, where the idea of reaping what you sow
Yeah.
is there. And so that's really what we see coming out, and that basically is exactly what Jotham predicted.
Yeah.
Is they're gonna reap what they sow. You chose an evil dude. He acted evilly.
Yeah.
Another evil dude came up, and you decided you wanted to turn against the evil dude you chose. Well, you know what? It's a big, chaotic craziness, right?
Yeah. And the most similar thing to this, right, as sort of mentioned, this idea, it says that, an evil spirit went between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem, is this idea that we had kind of chatted about. You'll see this with Saul, right? You'll see this thing where it says the spirit of the Lord departed him and an evil spirit came upon him, right? And you go, well, why was that happening? Well, that happened after Saul was disobedient to the commands that God had given him.
Mm-hmm.
And so, then he's told the kingdom is being taken away from you and it's going to be given to your better, right? And so that from that time on, it says the spirit of the Lord left him and an evil spirit would come upon him. And from that point, we see him then start to act jealously and suspiciously, and he tries to kill David multiple times, who's only done good things for him, right? He's defeated Goliath and these kinds of deals. But that's what happens, right? When he's chosen, like we saw in Romans, right? He's left the truth. He's left God. And so what's the result of that, right? The result of that then is his own perverted thinking becomes the problem for him.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah,
that's what's happened here, right? You pick this guy and now you're going to get what you asked for, right? You
absolutely
got a worthless fellow. And right, this idea that you killed these 70 innocent people as well, right? And God is going to require their blood.
They had done nothing to deserve death.
You're right, because he says, what did they do, right? They were the sons of the man who delivered you from the Midianites. Remember that?
Yeah.
Remember how awful things were? And this guy came and saved you, and this is how you've repaid him and his family, right? You've killed them all?
Yeah, so there's some. So let's just wrap it up with the story itself.
Yeah.
So we see this battle playing out where, although the bad guys go to the Tower of Shechem, right, and they seem to have walled themselves up.
Yeah.
Right, and so Gideon and his guys,
Abimelech and his guys,
Abimelech and his guys, we're both making name errors tonight. They gather brambles, and they're like, hey, everybody do what I did. Gather a big bunch of sticks on your back, and they basically decide to burn them out.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when you read it, right, and the translations are different, of course, but when you look at verse 48, right, it says, he went to Mount Zalban, he took his people with him, and he took an axe, and he cut down a bunch or a bundle of brushwood, right? So again, it's like this idea that it's not like they're felling these huge trees and building this great pyre of logs, right? No, they're cutting brushwood, they're cutting brambles, they're getting sticks, and they just get up a big bundle of it, and he tells everybody do the same, right? And so they all do. As he tells them, as you've seen me do, hurry and do the same. They all take their bundle, they go to the stronghold, and they set it on fire, right? So they basically burn down. And you're thinking probably of a tower or stronghold, and in our minds, you're maybe thinking of like a medieval castle type thing with all made out of stone block and whatever. But this is not the case. If there is stone and support, I mean, it's wood, it's structured, right? It's more of like a palisade in that sense. And so it's this wooden tower effectively that they burn to the ground with these people on it. That's big, right? The people of Shechem have hidden there, and he's burned the city at this point. He's razed it, he's salted it. The people are hiding out in the tower, hoping for the best, and he just burns it down.
A thousand men and women.
Yeah, right.
So
it's not just combatants, but it's the leaders of the town, basically, right? That he had said, the leaders of the town and the the nobility and their wives.
Yeah,
and their
so that was
women.
the Tower of Shechem. Then they
Yep.
also had, Thebes, an
Yeah, so
encampment
he goes to
there,
the
and they
next town,
captured
basically, right?
that.
Yeah.
And then it said all of the women and the leaders of that city fled to that tower,
Yeah.
and they hid themselves in it. And so Abimelech, so this is like tower number 2.
Right.
And Abimelech came to the tower and fought against it and drew near to the door of the tower to burn it with fire. Now, I like this little section. And a certain woman,
Yeah.
we don't know her name, threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. But apparently it wasn't crushed enough,
Yeah. It was an instant death.
right? So as he's laying there dying with a broken head, he called to his armor bearer, this young man, and says, "Draw your sword and kill me, lest they say of me, a woman killed me." Right? So can you imagine that the last request of your life is that your legacy not be that you were killed by a woman?
Yeah. It's
Really?
it's an
That's the
interesting
last
thing.
thing you worry about?
Well, I can almost imagine, right? It has to be in his mind, the ideal of Jael and Sisera, right? That we saw with Barak and Deborah, right?
Yeah.
That the Jael ends up being killed, or Sisera ends up being killed by this woman who drives this tent peg through his head.
Yeah.
And they make a song about it, right? They make a song about it. And so now
so
we're
true.
some,
I never thought about that.
40,
Yeah.
80, 100 years later, whatever, maybe. And he's like, uh-oh, I'm going to be the next Sisera, right? I'm going to be the next Sisera. And they're going to make a song about this. Don't let me be killed by this woman. Please let it be said that I died in battle, right? And so you kill me with the sword instead of being killed by a rock thrown by a woman. And so I have to imagine that's what's going through his mind, right? That like, I can't be the next Sisera here. You gotta do me a favor and kill me instead.
That's wild. Yeah. So when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, everyone departed to his home. Thus God returned the evil of Abimelech, which he committed against his father in killing his 70 brothers. And God also made all the evil of the men of Shechem return to their heads. And upon them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal.
Yeah, so you get it both ways, right? So Abimelech, his crime that he's being paid out for is the killing of his 70 brothers, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's the one who did that. He went and he got these people and he was trying to consolidate his power, so he did that. And then the men of Shechem, the evil that they're getting returned on their head, right, is effectively choosing this worthless fellow to be their king. And where did he get the money to kill the brothers? He hired them with money they gave him, right? So they're both basically getting paid out for the evil they do to the house of Gideon, right, on both sides. God is using the one to punish the other and vice versa, right? This is not a case where he sends this other nation down to punish Israel, right? He just turns the people against it. You guys take care of this. You punish each other. And so the men of Shechem and that city and Beth Millo, or where the Tower of Thebes is, they get what they were due, and Abimelech gets his due. And Jotham, it calls there the curse of Jotham, right? And so God uses that curse that has been put out there to carry out his justice on the people for the things that they've done.
So I think really sometimes we wonder, like, okay, this is in the middle of the book of Judges, and I know he's the son of Gideon, who was a good judge and
just finishing the story. Like, what's up here, right? Yeah.
Why include this story? Well, what there are lessons we can definitely pull out of it. I think really ultimately it's a lesson about leadership overall, not to get like political, but when we choose our leaders, who we choose is important.
Yeah.
Right. Whether that's locally in our own flocks, in our own congregations, like who we appoint as the shepherds of our congregations and our flocks, that matters a lot. If we're only appointing people that are charismatic but lack character, we may get thorns.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's definitely some lessons we can pull out of there from that perspective.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, certainly, like you mentioned about in the church, right, where this is why God gives us a list of things, right? These men need to have these characteristics and qualities
Hmm.
about them,
Yeah.
right, as opposed to just whoever you like, whoever's popular, who's ever the loudest, or whatever, right? And so certainly, we have these guidelines we ought to be following in the church, so this doesn't happen. And it's also why, likely God, well, you don't appoint an elder and he kills all the other elder qualified people to consolidate his position, right? No, there are multiple people, right? So his original proposition is, wouldn't it be better if just one person ruled over you instead of all these 70 people?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, that sounds good. No, that's wrong, right? That's backwards. The answer should have been, no, we don't want that, right? And that's why God has set up these plurality of elders in these churches,
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, when you get into they're setting up a king, right? And so when you get into the politics side of things, right, more and more what we see is that there is, how many times have we heard it over the last, my lifetime, right? I'm just picking from the lesser of two evils, right? Like that's a phrase we use almost every election cycle. And you're like, well, how did we get here? Where you're saying both choices are evil and bad, and I'm just going to pick the less bad one, right? And then we wonder, why are we in the situations that we find ourselves in, right?
Yeah.
Because we're not picking good leaders, we're picking the least bad option, is what I hear all the time, right?
Right.
And so this is a challenge, and so you shouldn't be surprised when you have these
for
things play out,
sure.
right? Yeah.
I mean, and I think as Christian Americans, and I say it that way specifically because we should be Christians first and
Sure.
Americans second. Our citizenship is in heaven, and so the citizenship we have here on this earth matters so much less.
Yeah.
But as we try to be good Americans, voting is important, things like that. But yeah, we have to remind ourselves always, when we think about how crazy and evil politicians in general tend to be, there's only one entity that was created by God to do good on the planet, and that's the church, right? I'm not talking about some global giant
Sure.
megalopolis, organization. I'm talking about Jesus saying to the people in Jerusalem, you are the light of the world.
Right.
You are the salt of the earth. He's taught us to treat each other with love and to lift each other up and to be kind and to be courteous and to love your enemies and do good to all men, especially those of the household of faith. So we have so many of these lessons throughout the New Testament that we are called as people to be the vehicle by which goodness is shown. The goodness of God is shown through our good actions, right? Jesus said also in the Sermon on the Mount, let your light shine before men so they can see your good works and glorify God in heaven, right? And so when we get too political and we start thinking about leadership and power and wealth and all these kind of things, we're going to gravitate towards choosing leaders who
Right.
who are going to fulfill all those things. But we have to remember that the best leaders are busy being fruitful,
Right.
not busy trying to be famous, right?
Yeah. That's what all of these things, right? Like I'm already useful. Why would I leave my usefulness? There's so I don't particularly recommend that people read the Message as their translation because it's really paraphrasy, right? I was talking to the kids tonight, the teens.
There are some gems in there though.
Yeah, and so one of but this, when they're explaining it, one of the ways this comes across is it does say, right, like it says the olive tree, and basically the olive tree says, wait, should I take a demotion to go be your and not to be your king, to wave my hands over you, right? Like come and wave over us, right? And the fig tree, wait, should I take a demotion to come and just wave my hands over you? Like I've got useful things to do. Being king is a step down, right?
Yeah.
I presently serve gods, right? And when I'm anointing and doing these things, and why would I serve you people, right? Like it's a demotion.
Yeah.
And so you're right? The useful people are busy doing useful things, right? not just wanting to be leaders for leadership's sake.
Yep. Absolutely. So don't choose leaders who promise shade,
Yeah.
but only produce smoke, right? So that's definitely a lesson there that we can pull out. So and there's a bunch, but I don't want to drag it on too much. I think it's there for a lot of reasons, and we need to try to pull out as much application as we can. And it also is there because it is a historical moment in time, and it is one of the lessons or the things that happened that was, just again falling into that cycle. We talk about the cycle, right, where they're righteous for a while, and they go away from God, and God punishes them. That previously it was through the Midianites, who God rescued them from through Gideon. And then the next generation turns away from God again. And so this is just a glimpse, because it was just one generation from Gideon. He gave us a story so that we can have, a quick reminder of how quickly things can turn away from God, and so that's also another lesson we can probably think about.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we're getting this, like we are saying, we're seeing this degradation that's going to continue to happen, right? So it's the whole book of Judges. It's not like, we sometimes think like, okay, it's like this, it's up and then it's down and it's back up and then it's down. But what's actually happening is it's here and then it kind of goes down and then it comes back up, but not to the level it was before. And then it drops lower, and then it comes back, but not to the level it was before. And so it just keeps getting worse and worse. Like, it's degrading over time. And we see that play out with this whole thing, where now it's just Israel killing Israel, right? We're not even oppressing outside people. It's Israel killing Israel, right?
100%.
And the poor things that are going on there, and family killing family, right? This guy's killing his half brothers, right? And so you're just starting to see this moral degradation happen here in the book as well.
So I guess the last application we can maybe draw from this is comparing Abimelech to Jesus, right? Contrasting, contrasting Abimelech with Jesus. Abimelech as a king, he took power by killing his brothers.
Yeah.
Well, Jesus laid down his life for his brothers, or for us.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what a true king does. He lives as a sacrifice. He lives selflessly for the people. And I think we're all called to live that same kind of life, not to be kings, but to be selfless and to be servants. Yeah. And so when you see a man like Abimelech trying to seize power, he does so through evil and through violence and things like that. So certainly a lot of evil and violence in the world.
Yeah, for sure. We were kind of saying these lessons you can take, and one other one, just sort of briefly, there is we mentioned it before. This guy's be careful what you say, right? I mean, be careful what you say. This guy who we just comes on the scene out of nowhere, Gaal, he's all talk, and what's the result of that, right? And like we mentioned as well, part of that talk is coming probably when he's drunk, right? And he's running his mouth, and he gets held accountable for that, right? And we'll see this idea as well, that, right, every idle word you say will come to judgment, right? You don't have an excuse of, well, I was just joking, I was just speaking my, God holds him to account for it. And so we need to be mindful of the things we say and the brags and the boasts that we make and these sorts of things, right? Which is why we're called to be humble instead of that way, because he's a good everyone in the story is an example of what not to be, right? Every single person is, whatever they did, do the opposite. Don't do that. Right? And so certainly it's
crazy. Well, that is the story of Abimelech. Judges chapter 9. We will continue next week with our next little segment there, getting into chapter 10. And that's it. I think that we had a lot of good stuff we pulled out of this story. I'm rather pleased. When I first started looking at it, I'm like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna approach this? But I'm glad we were able to come up with this plan. I think it worked out rather well. So hey, go out there, be lights. Try to be good, but tell the truth, even if it's hard. There's a lot of misinformation and untruth out there, and so we just need to do our best to give people hope, because there's not a lot of hope in this world. This world doesn't offer any hope to anybody.
Yeah.
There's nothing new under the sun. So despite how new a lot of this stuff feels, it's just because we, in our time, have never experienced a lot of the evils that are out there. But God's got a home for us prepared, and we just need to embrace him and, come to the Lord, be right, and look to heaven. So that's my message. So, all right, everybody have a wonderful week. And, time change is coming up. When
Yes,
is
it
the
is.
time changing?
The time changes next week. So this is coming out on what day? Tuesday. So yes, it will be next Sunday, the 8th, which is when all of you all who switch your clocks will switch your clocks. We don't do that here in my
You
part of
silly
Arizona.
Arizonians. So we're gonna spring forward,
Yes.
which means you'll be with California again.
Yes, it'll be 3 hours different from you here in a week instead of 2.
That's gonna stink. So, well, at least for this podcast, right? You're like, it's not gonna change my life at
That's right.
all. I'm just gonna.
That's why we don't change our time.
So don't forget to. Well, most every clock on the planet is digital.
Does it automatically now, right? Yeah.
Just in case, though, make sure to manually move those, and we'll see you next week, 1 hour ahead of now.
Earlier, later? I don't know. How does that work?
All right. Take care, everybody.